What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's some of my early thoughts ahead of the Game Week 18 deadline. So I'm going to discuss defenders to bring in, plus the goalkeeper problems at the moment, and also discuss the Bournemouth versus Luton game and what might happen from an FPL point of view. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already, and let's jump into it. So let's start with Trent Alexander-Arnold, a defender that will cost you 8.2 million in FPL, and someone that I've recently said I'm going to completely ignore in my own FPL squad because I've got other defenders that I can play instead. Most of my money is tied up in attack, and the fixtures that Liverpool have got coming up don't really scream clean sheets. And yet here I am going into Game Week 18 considering buying him. So what has changed? Well, I've sold Haaland, right? And now I've got more money to spend, and it might be a bit easier to get him. And yes, Arsenal at home in Game Week 18 isn't great, but my alternative is probably playing one of my Arsenal defenders against Liverpool away. And I don't think that's any better, especially when Trent is more attacking than all of them. So I am considering getting him because I've got that Haaland money to go around. I think in terms of the fixtures, my opinion hasn't really changed. They are difficult coming up for Liverpool. Next 6 games, they've got to play Arsenal twice, both home and away. So in Game Week 18 and 23. Their best fixture of the next 6 is probably Game Week 19, where they've got Burnley away. And then the 3 other matches are Newcastle at home, Bournemouth away, and Chelsea at home. So it doesn't look great. I think if Liverpool got 3 clean sheets over those games, that would probably be about the best they can do. 2 is probably more realistic. And if you can get 1 or 2 attacking returns along with that, that's probably enough at a time when the money isn't needed elsewhere. I think if Haaland was fully fit and there was no African Cup of Nations, no Asia Cup, I wouldn't even be looking at Trent. But the money situation has changed a little bit. Now, there's part of me that is worried about future game weeks because when Haaland is fit, I'm going to want him back. When Salah is back from African Cup of Nations, I'm probably going to want him as well. How do I get both of those players and worry about Son and deal with Trent? Suddenly, it's a lot of transfers in the future that I'm going to have to make, and that doesn't even include suspensions and injuries and stuff like that. But part of me also thinks, just get him now and worry about that later, because in 4, 5, 6, 7 game weeks' time, whenever it might be, where I have to think about those things, something else might have changed. What if Saka's injured at that point? There's more money to go around. What if I don't feel like I need Son back? There's more money to go around. Maybe I can still have Salah and Haaland and not worry about the fact that I've spent money on Trent. And the fixtures are difficult now, but coming up in the future, they are a lot easier. If we look a bit more longer term for Liverpool, after Arsenal away in Game Week 23, it's Burnley at home in 24, Brentford away in 25, Luton at home in 26, Forest away in 27. Like, those fixtures are a lot better. Now, I know it's a long way away, but I'm already thinking about possible blanks and stuff in the future. And a lot of this decision might depend on what happens between Liverpool and West Ham in the Carabao Cup, which will be played before Game Week 18. Because whoever gets to the final will blank in Game Week 26. So if Liverpool beat West Ham and they're through to the final, all of a sudden you're going to lose one of those great fixtures in the future, Luton at home, and then he's someone else that you have to deal with later on. Now, the knock-on from that is, if you have a blank, it also means you have to have a double game week later, and there is a chance that could happen before Game Week 26. So let's say Liverpool doubled in 25, Brentford away, Luton at home. Well, all of a sudden you'd probably want Trent, right? And if you had to get Salah in by sacrificing Haaland for a double game week, then you'd probably do that. So even if he loses that Luton game, there might still be reason to have him. Plus, obviously, by that point, something else might have happened, right? There might be more money to go around anyway. I guess the other thing to think about, as well, is when Salah might be back from African Cup of Nations, because they're definitely going to miss Game Week 21, right? That's a certainty. And then they could miss up to Game Week 25. So any player that goes away, depending on how far they get through the tournament. And so if you're getting to kind of Game Weeks 24 and 25 and you're still not sure if Salah's going to be available and he's blanking in 26, at what point do you even need to buy him back? And this is what I'm talking about in the future, where it might not be an issue buying Trent now. And I guess that's the kind of risk you take. You either get him now, and in the future, if it's a problem, you just deal with it, even if it's for a hit. But you might get lucky and not even need that money for Salah. So I am quite tempted by Trent, because I think the fixture this week will put people off. So will the fixtures coming up. And in some ways, I think that's right to do that. I think if you've got other fires to put out, Trent is not really a priority. But for me, I've got Matty Cash this week, who may not play. I've got Charlie Taylor against Fulham away. or I'm playing one or two of my Arsenal defenders against Liverpool away. And I think as bad as Trent might be, for that much money at Arsenal at home, he's not any worse than those other players I've got to play. And then Burnley away is pretty good. I don't think home games against Newcastle and Chelsea are the end of the world either. And we just know what he can do from an attacking perspective. So things have changed a little bit. As I said, if Haaland was fit, Salah wasn't going away, neither was Son, I wouldn't even be looking at Trent. But I am strongly considering it. I guess for that much money, the only other player to even kind of mention is Trippier. If he's fit for Luton, then he could be an option as well. But they've also got tricky fixtures coming up from game weeks 20 to 22. It's Liverpool away, Man City at home, Villa away. After that, they do get better. And if they lose to Chelsea in the Carabao Cup, they would play in game week 26, so no blank. And the fixtures around it are pretty decent. And I do think the Newcastle defence, when everyone is fit, is better than Liverpool as well. And we know how attacking Trippier can be. So that is another option, right? Instead of Trent, I could spend the money on Trippier. But I do think they've both got a little bit of a dodgy set of fixtures. But either way, I'm thinking about spending that money and then worrying in the future about what to do with it. So I'm going to go from talking about £7 million plus defenders to talking about much cheaper ones. And Ezri Konsa will cost you just 4.5 million. And I think if you're looking for a new defender in game week 18 at that price point or below, he is the one to go for, especially when Aston Villa are playing Sheffield United at home. Decent fixture, decent price, pretty much nailed on. There are some alternatives in and around that price you could look at. I think Chelsea and Levi Colwill is definitely one of those for 4.6. You have missed the Sheffield United at home fixture for Chelsea, because that happened in game week 17. But they've still got Wolves away, Palace at home, Luton away and Fulham at home to come in the next 4. And even after Liverpool away in 22, it's then Wolves at home and Palace away. So Chelsea's fixture run is good for a little while. The only reason I prefer Konsa over Colwill, I guess, one, he's a tiny bit cheaper. But also, when players like Cucurella start coming back from injury, Colwill's minutes, I don't think they're at major risk, right? He'll start the majority of games, maybe even all of them. There is a slight doubt there for me, whereas I don't have that with Konsa. So that is why I'd probably go for the Aston Villa defender instead. But there's nothing wrong with Colwill if that's the way you want to go. And then for Newcastle, I just think, unless you're going to go for Trippier, I would just ignore everybody else. If you own Lascelles already, or if you own Livramento, that's a different story, right? You probably keep hold of them. But I just wouldn't be buying them new now. They've got Luton away in 18, Forest at home in 19, two decent enough fixtures. But then it's Liverpool away, Man City at home, Villa away, so a bit trickier. And I just think the minutes are too hard to call right now. You know, Dan Burn's back, so will he take minutes off of Livramento at left back? Probably. And obviously, if you go for Dan Burn, Livramento could take minutes off him as well. Like, it could work both ways. So I think they're both worth ignoring. Botman is back now, and he played 6 minutes against Fulham. So if he gets a few more minutes in the Carabao Cup, he could start against Luton, but I don't think that's a guarantee. And also, I would worry that he's been out for so long about what his fitness levels will be. They've obviously managed him well, but I just don't think it's worth going for. And then you've got Cher, who went off with an injury, probably not worth buying at 5.3 million, even if he's back. And then Lascelles will be fine as long as one of Botman or Cher is out. But once they're back, he's then a problem as well. So I just think it's the wrong time to buy Newcastle defenders. But if you've got them, you probably keep hold of them. So that brings me back to Aston Villa. I think Konsa is nailed. Sheffield United at home in 18, good fixture. Burnley at home in 20, good fixture. Sheffield United away in 23, good fixture. So 3 games where you could definitely play him over the next 6. And obviously at that price point, you can just bench him for the more difficult games. As always, look through your own team and decide when you need when you need a defender to cover for your other defenders. But for a lot of people, I think Konsa's going to work. With other Aston Villa defenders, Pau Torres might be fine, and he might be worth paying the extra 0.2 million for, but he did go off with a slight injury against Brentford, so that's worth keeping an eye on. And when you look at the bonus points, like him and Konsa have had 4 each this season, and when you look at the attacking numbers, like when I think about it without looking at the stats, I feel like Pau Torres is a bit more of a goal threat, but the numbers don't really tell me that. I just don't know if there's a massive need to spend an extra 0.2 million. Like, Pau Torres is probably the one I would go for if money was no issue, but I don't think that if there's a massive need to do that in this particular case, especially when you're going to bench them quite often. So I would probably just go for Konsa. And then with Moreno, he's brilliant, right? He got a 10-pointer against Brentford, but there is no guarantee he will keep playing. I think if everyone was fully fit for weeks and weeks and weeks, he is probably ahead of Luka Dean in the pecking order. But Luca Dean has played well this season. He's played a lot of minutes. And I think over the next 3 game weeks, 18 to 20, for Aston Villa, you've got Friday, Tuesday, Saturday turnaround. Now, Friday to Tuesday isn't that bad, and Tuesday to Saturday isn't that bad either. But I just don't think Moreno, after being out for so long this season, plays all 3 of those games. Luca Dean will get minutes, so it's just not worth that headache for me. And obviously, let's not even think about Matty Cash right now, because you just don't know if he's going to be in and out of the team. So if I was going for an Aston Villa defender or a cheap defender this week at 4.5 or below, I think it'd be Ezri Konsa. So let's move on to goalkeepers, because Areola is starting to become a bit of a problem for FPL managers. He was on the bench once again at the weekend. It was Fabianski that started for West Ham against Wolves. And the problem is, you're unlikely to get any new information that tells you whether Areola is going to start or not ahead of game week 18. West Ham do have a Carabao Cup game, but Fabianski usually starts those anyway. So Areola is an issue. Whether or not he's going to start in game week 18, the honest answer is I just don't know. Some people have speculated that maybe his wrist hasn't fully healed and they're giving him a bit more time before he comes back in and takes that number 1 spot in the league. But that is not a guarantee. What I would say is, if you've got a second playing keeper, especially if you've got Dubravka or someone like that, just don't worry about this for now. You can keep playing Dubravka and see whether Areola wins his place back. If you've got Areola and a second goalkeeper that's not playing, that might be something that you have to deal with in game week 18 if you've got the spare transfer to do it. There is probably an argument to be made that if you've got like Flecken and Areola, and obviously Flecken's not playing because he blanks, you could just risk it for game week 18 because you know Flecken's going to come back in afterwards. But if you've got a second keeper that's definitely not going to play whatever happens moving forward, then maybe you use a transfer. Who you should bring in really depends on how much money you've got to spend. I genuinely don't think there is a standout obvious keeper to go for. It really depends on how much funds you can spend on that position, basically. So, for example, right, let's just go through some of these prices. At Areola's price point or below, so what is he? Is he 4.2 million? Yeah, you're really looking at Dubravka. Is Dubravka absolutely nailed on moving forward? Hopefully, but could Newcastle buy a new goalkeeper in January? It's a possibility. So even he is not completely safe. But if you're spending that kind of money or below, you should just go for Dubravka. If you're spending a bit more, 4.5 or below, then you could go for Flecken, and they will possibly get a double game week at some point over the next kind of 4 to 6 weeks. But obviously he's not playing in game week 18, so you can't really buy him until game week 19. Otherwise, it's probably Jordan Pickford. Now, I know Everton have kept 4 clean sheets in a row. Their defensive numbers, by the way, are also excellent. For non-penalty expected goals conceded this season, they are 3rd, right, which is incredible. So maybe we should give them a bit more credit moving forward. But even if they keep that up, the fixtures they've got coming up just aren't that great, I don't think. Like Spurs away, Man City at home, Wolves away next 3, Villa at home, Fulham away, Spurs at home, Man City away. Like in the next, 7 weeks, they got to play Spurs and Man City twice. That just isn't great. And obviously later on you'll have a second wild card to deal with it anyway. So I think if I was needing a goalkeeper this week and I had that much money to spend or less, so 4.5 or 4.4, I would definitely go for Pickford. But I wouldn't necessarily expect the amount of clean sheets they've had to kind of keep up with the fixtures they've got coming up. But I don't think Pickford's a bad option or anything like that. If you've got a bit more money to spend around the 5 million price point, the two that I would look at are probably Raya for Arsenal. And I think Arsenal's long-term fixtures are great. So I think he's a really good choice. Or Martinez at Aston Villa. But I think unless you're desperate to have 3 outfield Arsenal players, which maybe you might want moving forward, I don't think there's any reason to buy Martinez over Raya. I just think Raya is the better option between the two. The only potential issue down the line is that in game week 28, which I know is a while away, Arsenal are playing Brentford and Raya won't be able to play in that game. So by that point, you'll need a second playing keeper, and you just have to hope that Dubravka or someone like that will keep playing if that's someone that you already own. But that's a long time away, and I just think in the meantime, Raya is a better option than Martinez. But if you've got like Saliba and Saka and you might want to add a second Arsenal attacker or a second Arsenal defender, obviously don't block that 3rd spot by buying Raya. And if you want to go up a bit more money, you've got someone like Alisson or even Edison. Man City's fixtures are great coming up. But I can tell you from personal experience, owning Edison is just never fun because I don't know, they always find a way to concede. It just seems to happen. I think the Man City defence is great, maybe less so this year compared to previous seasons, but the stats are still there. Eventually they will get the clean sheets, but it just doesn't seem to matter, right? Ederson just always feels like he's going to concede. And also you can't buy him this week anyway because he blanked. So I think if you're going this week, it's probably Pickford or Raya, depending on how much money you've got to spend. Like I said, if you don't want to block that third spot, go for Martinez. And if you don't have much money to spend, it's probably going to have to be Dubravka. I've never, look, maybe it's just a recency thing, but I don't remember too many seasons where we had this many issues over goalkeepers. And obviously the easiest thing to have done was just to keep Pickford because he's been great. But I would try and, I think when you make this transfer, if you decide to do that, you don't want to have to keep making them down the line. So make sure you buy someone that you know is going to keep starting. And like I said, that is probably Pickford or Raya this week. So I want to quickly touch on the Bournemouth versus Luton game from Saturday, because understandably, a lot of people are still asking questions about what's going to happen from an FPL point of view. And I did discuss it on the stream last night, but I don't think I necessarily put my point across that well. It's been a long day outside of FPL stuff, plus all weekend about this particular situation. I've been getting a lot of questions and a lot of opinion, as you might imagine, and I was doing it live. And it's not always as easy to do that stuff live as it is to do it pre-recorded. So let's discuss it now. This is what FPL have said. Game week 17 will remain open after the conclusion of Sunday's matches. More information will follow in due course. So for people wondering why, I don't know, let's say you've got Isak in your team and he's played no minutes and you've had no sub come on, that is because technically game week 17 hasn't finished yet and it's still open, right? You will get those points, so just sit back and relax. And I assume all this will be sorted out before the game week 18 deadline. So the game week is still technically open right now. The reason they've done that, again, I would assume, is because they're waiting for the Premier League to make a decision on what's going to happen with that game. I think most of us expect it to be completely abandoned and then replayed at a later date. But until the game week 18 deadline, there's no need for FPL to rush a decision. They might as well wait to see what the Premier League decides before they decide what to do with the FPL points and stuff like that. There might also be some technical limitations, but I think the main reason is they're just waiting to see what happens. And you would assume that decision will be made probably today or Monday or maybe Tuesday, and then FPL can sort it before Thursday's deadline. Okay. Lots of people want my opinion about what should happen. I know yesterday I said it doesn't really matter to me. I don't care. That probably wasn't the best way of putting it. What I meant was I will just accept what FPL decide, because at the end of the day, this is a freak event. And that doesn't mean that I think people shouldn't be frustrated or shouldn't discuss it, right? Not at all. I am fully aware that people can have more than one thought at once. We can all hope that Tom Lockyer is completely okay and gets back to playing football. And then at the same time, also be thinking, well, what's going to happen to our FPL points? But to me, I will just accept it because these things don't happen very often. And I know that people think the only reason I think that is because I've got Gordon on the bench. So really, it's not going to matter to me anyway. But I promise you that's not the case. I'm not going to sit here and try and convince people of that. It's just not worth it, right? People will believe what they believe. But I just think in these situations, I'm prepared to accept whatever FPL decide. I know I joke around about, March's goal from last year. I'm still missing my Ederson assist. That's all kind of, jokey things. With this, I'll just accept it. So that's what I meant by it doesn't matter to me and I don't care, right? It's just not a great way of putting it. In terms of what I think should happen, that will depend on what the decision is with the game, okay? So if the result stands, and I know this is unlikely, I'm just going through all the different scenarios. If it stands at 1-1, then I think everyone should just get their points from that game. And I'm going to use Solanke as an example a lot because he was probably the most owned player in that match. If it stayed 1-1, he should get the points for the goal and the bonus points, in my opinion. If it's abandoned and replayed before the game week 18 deadline, then anyone that owned players in that game should just get the points from the replayed match. So let's just say right now Solanke's on 9 points. If it was replayed before game week 18 on Thursday and Solanke blanked, then Solanke owners should only get 2 points, right? That's what I think should happen. The most likely thing is, if it's abandoned and replayed later on, first of all, that will be a double game week later. And no, you won't get the same players you owned at the time. You'll have to bring them back in later because that's always what happens, right? If a game gets called off for weather, which I know is slightly different because that happens before the match kicks off, and this is kind of been abandoned after it started. But if that happens, everyone gets a chance to bring those players in later. FPL have always done that. So that is what they should do in this situation. Is it fair? Maybe not. But again, this is a freak event, and that is what FPL usually do with those matches that get replayed later. It's always a double game week. Everyone always has the chance to bring those players in. What should happen to the points this week? It probably makes the most sense just to wipe them completely and then just auto-sub players on. And unfortunately, that does mean that some people are going to have Jimenez and Archer. Others are going to get Gordon. There's not much I or FPL can do about that. But that probably is what is going to happen. If it's abandoned and replayed later on, they'll wipe the points now. They'll auto-sub players on. And then it'll be a double game week later. And everyone else can, get the points from that game by bringing in those players. Look, there's obviously lots of opinions about this, that FPL should just keep the points. If they decide to do that, then I'll accept that as well. There's a lot of people saying they can't do that because if the game doesn't count, how can FPL give the points? But FPL already give assists that aren't given to players outside of the fantasy game. There's no reason why they couldn't give the points for the game and have a double game week. I just don't think that's what's likely to happen. And I don't think that makes a lot of sense either, right? So that is it. We'll wait to see what the Premier League decide. Once they've decided, FPL will decide and communicate to us. The most likely thing is the points will be wiped. All the auto subs will happen. It will be as if those players never played. And then later on, it will be a double game week. I'm just going to accept whatever will happen. And like I said, if you want to believe that's only because I own Gordon or whatever, that's completely up to you. I'm not going to keep discussing this because I think we're just going to go round in circles. And there's never going to be a point where everyone is happy. So the next time I'll talk about this will probably be when FPL have communicated to us. I just hope it's decided in the next couple of days to kind of, just put people out of their misery and let them kind of move on. So yeah, fingers crossed. When it's happened, we'll talk about it again and we'll just go from there. So I'm actually going to leave that one there. I know there's plenty more to discuss this week, but we got transfer tips tomorrow, team selection on Wednesday, and final thoughts on Thursday morning. Don't forget that it's a Thursday deadline, 6:30 p.m. UK time. So I'll also have the deadline stream that day starting at 5 p.m. as well. So plenty more content to come. If you've enjoyed that video, make sure to give it a like. Hit that subscribe button if you're on YouTube. Trying to hit 391k subscribers before the Game Week 18 deadline. And if you listen on podcast, don't forget to rate 5 stars. Otherwise, I'll catch you again tomorrow.